Hello and welcome to the third and final mid-season update for this edition of the VeloTour. Only 3 races remain after this comes out, one of them being the Tour de France, so a lot of points are still left out on the road. Let's take a look at the new leaderboard, and it's Bianchi Campagnolo, who at last have come up in the first place. They lead by just 21 points over La Vie Claire. La Vie Claire down 1 spot into second place, but they've been leading all season. Evian up 2 spots in the third, so they have climbed a long way up the leaderboard since early in the season. Blackberry up 2 spots into 4th, more on how that happened later. Calme down 1 place in the 5th. Fiat have at last tumbled from 3rd down to 6th place. Zulu Kingdom still in 7th place. Adidas climbing out of the cellar up into 8th, and Ceramicas down into 9th place. Of course, there's also the leftovers, but they are not player-controlled team, so we tend to not include them. We'll start the team-by-team reports with the Bianchi Campagnolo up in first place. Very solid performance in the Ardennes Classics. They outscored La Vie Claire in those races, and Stan Åker's second place in both La Flèche Wallonne and Liège-Bastogne-Liège. They won stages 2 and 3 in the Tour of Switzerland with Pascal Richard. And Stan Åker's pretty good in the general classification, finishing 4th overall there. Overall, the team has been consistent as they've been all season. They finally got up into first place, but they lead by just 21 points. And since the final races on paper favor La Vie Claire, they'll certainly have their work cut out for them. La Vie Claire at last been pushed down in the second, but perhaps not for very long. They finished 5th place in all 3 Ardennes races, 2 of those by Cyril Guimard and 1 by Federico Ezquerra. They met expectations in those races and kept pace enough with Bianchi Campagnolo to not let them go out to a big lead. Ghost Peterson won the Stage 7 time trial in the Tour de Switzerland. He also finished 2nd overall in that race, just 9 seconds behind Bjarne Riis, so looking good ahead of the Tour de France, or he'll be one of the big favorites. With Andre Darrigade, Ghost Peterson, and Cyril Guimard leading the way in the Tour de France, La Vie Claire are favored to win the title. There's also the Flat Paris Tour Classic, which I think Darrigade should be a big favorite for that as well. So big scoring potential left for La Vie Claire, and at this point they look great to go out and win the title, but of course anything can happen from here on out. The upstart Evian up into 3rd place. They had a rough start to the season, but they've been ascending the leaderboard and are now just under 400 points behind the leaders. They are very productive in the Ardennes Classics, 3rd in Amstel Gold, 4th in Flèche Wallonne, and 3rd in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, accomplishing that with 3 different riders, so showing their overall strength. They also had 7 top 10s across those 3 races, which was the most of any team. Andy Schleck continues to win races, getting stage 5 of the Tour of Switzerland. He also finished 3rd overall, but didn't time trial very well, which may hold him back later on in the Tour de France. Evian also won the team classification in the Tour of Switzerland to go along with their win in Tirreno Adriatico in that same contest, so they will be the early favorite to win that in the Tour de France. They will have to do a lot of damage in Ile Lombardia and in the Tour de France to defeat La Vie Claire and Bianchi Campagnolo, but they are very much in contention and could be the dark horse to win the title. Blackberry up into 4th place, and it's all about Julien Alaphilippe. He dominated the Ardennes Classics, 2nd in Amstel Gold, 1st in Flèche Wallonne, 1st in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, nearly maxing out those 3 races, and if he'd done the triple that would have been pretty historic. But nonetheless, he's the top scoring rider by over 1,300 points. He's outscored the Ceramicas team by himself, so confirming his status as a superstar and why Miles chose him with the number 1 overall pick. However, Alaphilippe not allowed to start the Tour of Switzerland because he was in the earlier stage races. Henri Anglade and Tommy Prem tasked to pick up the slack, but only finished 8th and 9th overall, the team only 5th in the team classification, so not getting very much out of that race. Still, they scored so many points in the Ardennes that they climbed 2 spots up in the 4th place. They'll have to fend off Calme and Fiat to remain there, but Blackberry still has some scoring potential. Ile Lombardia looks good for Alaphilippe, and of course they have some options in the Tour de France, and I think they'll be up there in the team classification. So it's looking up for Blackberry and Miles, confirming his status out of the cellar, perhaps maybe a contender in future seasons. Kelme down one spot into 5th place. It was a bit of a tough stretch for them with the Ardennes because those races not suited well for the team. They had just 3 top 10s and 0 top 5s, losing out to some more explosive riders. But they flipped the script in the Tour of Switzerland, a huge success as Bjarne Riis won stage 6 and the race overall. It was his 2nd stage race win this season, so things looking up for the Tour de France, and with Bjarne Riis, I think Kelme will be favorites to win that yellow jersey overall. Frank Schleck was outstanding as Riis' right-hand man in the mountain stages, and although 4th place might be their ceiling based on how the top 3 teams are performing, they'll be big protagonists in the Tour de France, largely because of their general classification ambitions. In 6th place, Fiat seemed to have hit the wall a little bit. They actually exceeded their low expectations for the Ardennes, Marshall Gaillant 6th place in Liège-Bastogne-Liège being their best result in those races. The team showed their potential as stage hunters in the Tour of Switzerland. Urs Freuler finally got going, winning stage 4 and the points classification, and Marshall Gaillant won that epic mountain stage from the breakaway. He had great help from his teammate George Hincapie, and Gaillant also winning the mountains classification. So Marshall Gaillant emerging for the team, getting some great results for them. Fiat have options for the Paris Tour Classic, and I expect them to be active in the sprints and breakaways of the Tour de France. Their top 3 ambitions perhaps out the window, but still plenty of terrain for them to get some more victories. Remaining in 7th place is Zulu Kingdom, who we predicted to have a really tough stretch in this part of the season. They had 0 top 10s in the Ardennes Classics, their best result being 14th in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Things got a little better in the Tour of Switzerland. Jan Ullrich very successful in that race. He led the race overall for 3 stages, and he also finished 5th overall. So although Ullrich suffered on the first mountain stage, he got better each day after that, and eventually climbed up into the top 5. So a good GC result for the team. They did hold off the bottom 2 teams in the standings, and they should be more competitive in the final 3 races. Jamaldine Abdi-Japarov will be a protagonist in Paris Tour and in the Tour de France, and Zulu will be looking for stage win and the green jersey in the Tour de France, and we'll see how Jan Ullrich gets on in that general classification battle. So still some objectives to race for Zulu. They may be able to send 1 or 2 spots, but this seems to be a route where they'll end up by the end of the season. Adidas finally getting out of last place, at least for now. They got their first victory of the season with Philippe Gilbert in the Amstel Gold Race. They also got 3rd in La Flèche Wallonne and 4th in Liège-Bastogne-Liège, so a good outing in the Ardennes for Gilbert and the team. Did not take long to get a second victory because they won stage 1 of the Tour of Switzerland, Chris Boardman winning that short time trial. Their top climber Marco Pantani only getting 6th overall in that race. A bit of a disappointment, but the mountains not quite hard enough for his style. I think the Tour de France will be a bit better suited for him. The team has options for Ile Lombardia and in the Tour de France, looking for stage wins in the hills and mountains. If things go haywire in the mountains for everybody else, then Pantani could become a real challenger for the victory, but I think the time trial is a bit too far for him. But nonetheless, Adidas looking a lot more competitive, and they're looking a good bet to stay out of last place for the rest of the season. And finally, Ceramicas down in 9th place, things not going very well in this part of the season. They had 1 top 5 in the Ardennes Classics, that was Dmitry Konishev finishing 4th in the Amstel Gold Race, but they only had 1 other top 10, which was Andrew Hampsten in La Flèche Wallonne. Hampsten also failed to impress in the Tour of Switzerland, where he was the team leader, only managing a fringe top 10 finish. Things should trend up a little bit because Pedro Delgado and Mario Cipollini will be back in action. They will lead the way in the Tour de France, looking for stage wins, and perhaps the yellow jersey with Pedro Delgado. They need to gain 900 points on Adidas to get out of last place, and that looks a tall task, but Ceramicas certainly have the firepower to get at least 1 or 2 stage wins in the Tour de France, and perhaps mix things up in the Ile Lombardia. So from places 1 through 9, a lot still to race for each team. Everyone has the potential to score points and win some races. So let's take a look at what's coming up. first is VeloTour, a totally flat classic made for the pure sprinters. This is a really big opportunity for Andre Darrigot and Lavi Claire to gain on their rivals and stamp their authority on the season. Next there's Ile Lombardia, the one mountainous classic that really never fails to excite. Julien Alaphilippe, Stan Ockers, and Andy Schleck should be among the favorites for that, and this could be one of the better races of the season. And then the grand finale being the Tour de France. 21 stages with all sorts of terrain. It offers by far the most points of any race, and I'll make a separate preview video just for the tour with all the stages. But this is where the final places will be decided in the VeloTour. So a lot to look forward to and a lot of content to come. We'll see you next time for VeloTour.